She hadn't eaten for 2 weeks, hidden behind a life of luxury until one moment of love changed everything. The millionaire's daughter lived in a huge, beautiful mansion that looked like it had come straight out of a storybook. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. There were tall, shiny gates, a sparkling swimming pool, and a garden full of flowers in every color imaginable. Her room was decorated with the finest furniture, softest carpets, shelves full of toys and books that any child would dream of. She had everything a child could want, or so it seemed. People who visited the house would say how lucky she was, always talking about her designer clothes, fancy gadgets, and the kind of life most people could only imagine. But none of that told the real story of her life inside, despite all the luxury surrounding her. The young girl felt something that money could not buy. She felt lonely. Her father, a man known for his sharp mind and enormous wealth, was always busy with his business. He spent long hours traveling, attending meetings, and managing his empire. He loved his daughter, of course, but his love was shown mostly through gifts, lessons in etiquette, and promises to spend time with her soon. Soon often never came. Her mother had passed away when she was very young, leaving her without a comforting presence in her daily life. The staff tried to fill the gap, but no one could truly understand her feelings or make her feel complete. She was surrounded by people, yet she felt invisible. For 2 whole weeks she had hardly eaten anything. Some days she would skip meals entirely. Other days she would take tiny bites. Enough to keep from fainting, but far from enough to satisfy her hunger. Her appetite had disappeared not because there was nothing to eat, but because she felt sad and disconnected. Eating had become meaningless to her. It wasn't just that she didn't feel hungry. She didn't have the energy or the will to enjoy food or anything else. Every bite felt like a task she couldn't be bothered with. The more she ignored it, the weaker she became. The staff in the house had noticed changes. The cook would prepare her favorite meals: pasta, fresh fruits, chocolate, but they often ended up untouched. The nanny tried different methods, making the food fun, cutting it into shapes, or pretending the meals were part of a game, but nothing worked. She didn't even respond to their coaxing, and that worried everyone deeply. Even the family doctor, when called, said gently that her body was starting to weaken. But still, no one knew exactly why she refused to eat. It wasn't a matter of taste or preference. It was deeper than that. It was as if something inside her had shut down, and no amount of money or fancy food could open it again. Her father, meanwhile, had been traveling for work and didn't notice the extent of her struggle. He knew she was a little quiet, maybe a little picky with food, but he had no idea she hadn't eaten for 2 weeks. In his mind, she was a strong, capable child who would eventually eat when she was hungry. It was a blind spot he never realized he had. He trusted the staff to take care of her, believing that they were looking after every detail. After all, they had been working for the family for years. Yet even with all that care around her, she felt alone in her emotions, as if no one truly understood what she was going through. The girl's days followed a quiet, monotonous routine. She would wake up in her grand bedroom, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, and sit for a while, looking out at the garden. The flowers were beautiful, and the pool sparkled, but they didn't make her happy. She would pick up a book or toy, but her interest would fade quickly. She felt disconnected from the world around her. Even her usual activities, painting, playing the piano, or riding her horse in the stables, seemed dull and uninteresting. The excitement that normally came with her life of privilege had vanished, replaced by an emptiness she could not explain. Her loneliness was like a shadow, following her everywhere. She tried talking to the staff sometimes, but her words felt heavy, and no one could give her the kind of comfort she needed. They would smile, nod, or offer advice, but it didn't reach her heart. She wanted someone to just sit with her, to understand her feelings without asking for anything in return. She wanted to feel safe enough to cry or laugh, to express herself freely. But that connection didn't exist in her world of wealth and luxury. At night, the mansion was quiet, echoing with the creaks of the floorboards and the faint hum of the chandeliers. She would lie in her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how lonely she felt. She wondered if anyone truly knew her, if anyone could see past the wealth and the perfection to the real, her inside. She missed the warmth of her mother, the feeling of being completely understood. Sometimes she wished she could escape the golden cage of the mansion and just be a normal child, loved and cared for in a simple, heartfelt way. Even though she hadn't eaten properly, her mind was active. She thought about her father, about the people in her life, about the world beyond the mansion walls. She wondered why, despite having everything, she still felt so empty. The irony was not lost on her. She had more material wealth than most could ever dream of. Yet she hungered for something money could not buy. She craved love, attention, and genuine care, the kind that made her feel safe and cherished. It was during this time, in the quiet moments of her struggle, that a subtle change began. Though she didn't know it yet, someone new would soon enter her life. Someone who would notice her in a way no one else had, and who would begin to fill the emptiness she had felt for so long. But at this moment, she remained a fragile, lonely girl, trapped in a world of riches that couldn't soothe her spirit. She was physically weak, emotionally vulnerable, and desperately in need of someone to see her not, just the millionaire's daughter. But the little girl beneath the wealth, this part of her life shows that appearances can be deceiving. People looked at her and thought she had everything: happiness, security, love, but the truth was far from that. Her wealth had provided comfort, but it could not heal her heart or fill the emptiness inside. The stage was set for a dramatic shift in her life, a moment that would come from empathy and care rather than luxury. For now, she continued her quiet, lonely days, her body growing weaker and her spirit searching for hope. The world outside the mansion, full of laughter and simple joys, seemed distant and unreachable. Yet, even in her darkest moments, there was a small, unseen spark, a longing for connection, for understanding, for love that would eventually lead to the change she so desperately needed. This version focuses on emotions, details of her life, and the loneliness she felt, keeping it simple, engaging, and easy to read while building suspense for the next part. The days passed, and the young girl's condition became more serious. It had been 2 weeks since she had eaten properly, and every day her strength seemed to fade just a little more. She moved slower, her steps were quiet, and the sparkle in her eyes had dimmed. Even when she tried to speak, her words came out soft and fragile. Her body was telling a story that her words could not, a story of hunger, neglect, and silent struggle. It was a delicate balance between her mind holding on and her body growing weaker. The staff in the mansion were increasingly worried. They had tried everything they could think of to get her to eat. The cook had prepared her favorite dishes, one she used to love as a child. Sweet strawberries, creamy pasta, fresh bread, chocolate, and even delicacies imported from faraway countries, all of it sat untouched on her plate. The nanny tried different approaches, offering food with a gentle smile, turning meals into fun games, or coaxing her with stories about imaginary characters enjoying the same dishes. Sometimes they sang to her during meals, trying to make the experience joyful. But none of it worked. She would push the plate away, stare out of the window, or simply nod politely without taking a bite. Her father, who had always been proud of his daughter's strength and independence, had been traveling for business. He returned home one afternoon, expecting to see her energetic and cheerful as usual. But when he stepped into the grand hall, he noticed something was wrong immediately. The lively laughter that usually filled the corridors was gone. There was a quiet, almost eerie stillness that made him uneasy. He found her sitting in the garden, near the fountain, a spot she had always loved. But today, she wasn't laughing or playing. She was hunched over slightly, her hands resting limply in her lap, staring at the ground with hollow eyes. Panic struck him. He had never seen his daughter like this. Her normally bright cheeks were pale, and the subtle curve of her lips suggested exhaustion and sadness. He called her name gently, but she didn't respond at first. When she finally looked up, her eyes were tired and distant, as if she had been carrying the weight of the world alone for weeks. Her father felt a sharp pang in his chest. For all his wealth and influence, he realized he had missed something vital. No money, no mansion, no servants, no toys could have prevented this from happening. He was seeing the consequences of his absence. The nurse was immediately called. She examined the girl carefully, checking her pulse, her temperature, and her overall condition. She frowned, worried by the signs of malnutrition and dehydration. Her body was fragile, but even more concerning was her emotional state. The nurse knew that recovery would require more than just feeding her body. It would require healing her mind and heart. She gently suggested that the father sit with his daughter, speak to her, and try to understand what had caused this withdrawal from food and life. For the first time in days, the father truly saw his daughter. He saw her loneliness, her fear, and the silent cry for attention that had been hidden behind the walls of the mansion and layers of wealth. He realized that the staff, no matter how caring, could not replace human connection. He had relied on them to ensure everything was fine, but they had only been able to care for her body, not her spirit. The truth hit him hard. She needed him. It's not just his money. The girl remained quiet, hesitant to trust, unsure if anyone could understand her. She had been feeling invisible even in her own home for so long that she had started to believe that no one could help her. But her father's sudden presence and concern sparked a flicker of hope. She sensed that he was truly worried and not just reacting to a situation as a duty. The difference was subtle, but it mattered. For the first time, she felt the possibility that someone cared deeply about her well-being, not just physically, but emotionally too. The father sat beside her, not with lectures or advice, but simply with quiet presence. He did not scold her for not eating. He did not tell her how grateful she should be for her luxurious life. Instead, he acknowledged her feelings, telling her he had missed her and that he was sorry for not noticing sooner. He listened as she struggled to put her emotions into words. Slowly, she began to explain how lonely she had felt, how overwhelmed by the emptiness around her, and how even the abundance of wealth could not fill the void in her heart. Her words came out hesitantly at first, but the father remained patient. He asked gentle questions, never pushing, never judging. He made it clear that she could speak freely, that her feelings were valid, and that he was there to listen and understand. This moment marked a critical turning point. The barrier of silence that had separated them began to crumble. She was beginning to trust that her father could see her not just the image of perfection or wealth he had always held, but the real girl inside, struggling and in need of care. Meanwhile, the staff watched quietly, giving the father and daughter space. They had been caretakers for many years, but they understood that this moment required a deeper connection than they could provide. They quietly supported the process, ready to assist when needed. But letting the father take the lead in reconnecting with his daughter, their usual routines, meal, preparation, housekeeping, tutoring, were momentarily set aside. The emotional health of the child had become the priority. Everyone understood that. During the next few days, the father remained close. He sat with her during meals, not insisting she eat, but encouraging her gently. He would talk to her about her day, her dreams, her favorite stories, and even her fears. Slowly, the girl began to respond. She would take small bites of food when he was nearby, not because he forced her, but because she felt safe and cared for. She realized that someone was finally paying attention to her feelings, that someone truly wanted to help her heal. The power of emotional connection, something money could never buy, was beginning to show its impact. The father, too, was learning. He realized that wealth and gifts, no matter how extravagant, could never replace love, presence, and understanding. He had been so focused on providing everything materially that he had overlooked the most important aspect of raising a child, being there, truly and consistently. Watching his daughter slowly recover, even in small ways, made him reflect deeply on his own priorities. He vowed to change, to make sure that her emotional needs were never neglected again. The situation was still fragile. The girl's appetite had not fully returned, and her strength was still limited. But for the first time, hope existed in the household. The father's genuine concern, combined with patience, empathy, and consistent attention, it opened a door that had been closed for weeks. It was clear that recovery would take time, and it would require continued effort, care, and understanding. But the first step had been taken, and that first step was the most important. This period highlighted a truth that is often overlooked. Even those with everything in the world, money, luxury, Power can face struggles that cannot be fixed with wealth alone. The girl's crisis was a reminder that emotional care, love, and presence are invaluable, and that without them, even the richest life can feel empty. The father's realization, born out of fear and love, was the turning point that would lead to healing, trust, and eventually transformation. This version focuses on her worsening condition, the father's emotional awakening, and the building suspense of recovery, keeping it simple, engaging, and easy to read. After weeks of struggle and silence, a new presence entered the millionaire's daughter's life, a person who would change everything for her. This wasn't just another tutor, caretaker, or staff member. This was someone who had the patience, understanding, and kindness to notice the little things that everyone else had missed. From the very first day, this person didn't see the millionaire's daughter as a rich, spoiled child or as someone to manage. Instead, they saw her as a little girl, fragile, lonely, and in desperate need of care. That simple but powerful act of seeing her for who she truly was would become the beginning of a profound transformation. The new caretaker approached the girl gently. They didn't rush her or demand that she eat, speak, or act cheerful. Instead, they offered small gestures of warmth and understanding. A smile here, a gentle question there, or simply sitting nearby without saying anything at all. This presence alone was comforting. For weeks, the girl had felt invisible, surrounded by people who were busy with their routines or who tried to help only superficially. Now, for the first time, someone was truly paying attention. The subtlety of this approach made all the difference. At first, the girl was cautious. She had been let down before and was unsure if anyone could really understand her feelings. She would glance at the caretaker, sometimes with suspicion, sometimes with curiosity. She didn't speak much at first, her words minimal and soft, as if testing the waters. But the caretaker was patient. They never forced conversation or meals. They simply offered consistency, being there day after day, without pressure, without judgment. That consistent presence began to build trust. Even though the girl herself did not realize it at first, one day, the caretaker sat beside her during a quiet moment in the garden. The girl was staring at the flowers, her fingers tracing the petals absent-mindedly. The caretaker didn't interrupt. They simply commented softly about the colors, the sunlight, or the gentle movement of the leaves in the breeze. Slowly, the girl responded, first with a nod, then a small comment, then a whisper of her thoughts. It was a breakthrough, so subtle a sign that she was beginning to reconnect with the world and with someone who cared. The caretaker introduced small, simple ways to engage the girl emotionally. They would tell gentle stories, often about their own childhood or small adventures they had experienced. These stories were not extravagant or filled with lessons. They were simple, warm, and relatable. The daughter began to smile slightly, laugh softly at humorous moments, and even share her own stories from the past, memories of times before her hunger and isolation had taken over. Each story became a bridge, connecting her to someone outside her own thoughts, giving her a sense of companionship and understanding that she had lacked for weeks. The approach was never about forcing her to eat, though that was always in the background as a goal. Instead, the caretaker focused on rebuilding trust and emotional security first. They understood that the girl's refusal to eat was not a matter of preference, but a symptom of her deeper loneliness and fear. By addressing her emotional needs first, they were laying the foundation for true recovery. Every laugh, every story shared, every gentle touch or reassuring smile was a step toward opening her heart and making her feel safe. Slowly, the girl began to respond in small ways. She would pick up a fruit or a piece of bread without being asked, taking tiny bites as if testing whether it was safe to trust again. She began engaging in small conversations with the caretaker, talking about her favorite colors, her hobbies, or the things she remembered from before her illness. These moments, though small, were monumental. They represented the rebuilding of trust, the first steps toward reconnecting with life and the people around her. The caretaker's patience was remarkable. On days when progress seemed minimal, they never expressed frustration or disappointment. Instead, they adjusted their approach, understanding that healing is not linear. Some days the girl would retreat, refusing to eat or speak. Other days, she would laugh and engage freely. The caretaker accepted these fluctuations as part of the process, never pressuring her, but always providing a constant, supportive presence. This unwavering patience allowed the girl to feel safe, to take risks emotionally, and to slowly open up at her own pace. One afternoon, the caretaker suggested a small art activity, something simple like drawing or coloring in the garden. The girl hesitated, unsure if she wanted to participate, but the caretaker sat beside her, drawing quietly themselves. Slowly, she picked up a crayon and began to color. At first, her strokes were tentative and unsure, but with encouragement and shared laughter at small mistakes, she started to gain confidence. The joy in her eyes, the small smile that appeared, was a sign of progress, proof that she was rediscovering the pleasure of simple activities and the comfort of connection. Through these interactions, the girl also began to talk more openly about her feelings. She shared the sadness she had felt during the weeks of not eating, the loneliness she experienced despite being surrounded by wealth, and the fear that no one truly understood her. The caretaker listened without judgment, acknowledging her emotions and validating her experience. This emotional validation was crucial. It reassured the girl that her feelings mattered, that she was seen and heard, and that it was safe to express herself. For the first time in weeks, she felt that her emotions were understood, not dismissed. The father, observing from a distance, was deeply moved by the transformation he witnessed. He had been absent for much of the crisis, caught up in his work and business. Seeing the caretaker gently guide his daughter toward healing opened his eyes to the importance of empathy, presence, and emotional care. He realized that no amount of wealth, gifts, or luxury could replace genuine human connection. This lesson struck him profoundly and began to reshape the way he would approach his relationship with his daughter in the future. The caretaker also worked with subtle encouragement around food. Rather than insisting she'll eat full meals, they offered small portions of foods she liked, sitting with her and eating alongside her to create a sense of comfort. They would share stories about the food, talk about flavors, and make mealtime an engaging, safe experience rather than a chore or obligation. Slowly, she began taking more regular bites, her body responding naturally once the emotional barriers began to fall away. Over time, the daughter's laughter became more frequent. She began to move with more energy and confidence, exploring the mansion's gardens, interacting with the staff, and even enjoying small games or playful moments with the caretaker. These experiences were transformative, not just for her body, but for her mind and spirit. She started to feel alive again, feeling she had almost forgotten during the weeks of hunger and emotional withdrawal. By the end of this period, a remarkable change had occurred. The girl, once isolated and withdrawn, had begun to trust, to feel, and to engage with the world around her. The caretaker had succeeded in creating a safe space for her emotional and physical healing. She was still fragile in many ways, but the foundation for recovery was firmly in place. Small meals had become more regular, laughter more frequent, and a sense of hope had returned to her heart. This part of the story shows the incredible power of patience, empathy, and genuine care. It emphasizes that healing is not about forcing action or providing material wealth, but about understanding emotional needs, building trust, and creating a safe, supportive environment. Through these interactions, the millionaire's daughter was not just recovering her appetite, but also rebuilding her sense of self, her trust in others, and her ability to experience joy. The caretaker's role was central, but the lessons extended to the father and the household as well. Everyone learned that attention, love, and understanding matter far more than gifts, rules, or wealth. The girl's slow but steady transformation was proof that even in the darkest moments, someone's empathy and patience could spark hope, healing, and profound change. By the end of this part, the stage was set for the next chapter in her journey: the physical recovery, emotional rebuilding, and eventual joyful transformation that would continue to unfold in the weeks ahead. The foundation of trust, connection, and hope had been laid. making it possible for her to take the next steps toward a full and meaningful recovery. This version keeps it simple, engaging, and emotionally compelling, showing how the caretaker's presence and patience helped the girl open up and slowly begin to trust again. Slowly, very slowly, the girl began to change. After weeks of struggle, she started to take tiny steps toward recovery. It was not a dramatic, sudden transformation, but rather a gentle shift, almost imperceptible at first. She started with small bites of food, ones that she could manage without feeling overwhelmed. A piece of bread here, a few strawberries there, a sip of milk or juice. Little by little, her body began to regain strength. These small victories felt monumental, not just to the girl, but to everyone who cared about her, the person who had come into her life, the new caretaker, tutor, or simply someone who had taken the time to understand her continued to play a vital role. They never pushed her, never forced her to eat or act cheerful. Instead, they focused on patience, kindness, and gentle encouragement. Mealtime became something she could approach without fear or pressure. They would sit beside her, telling her stories, laughing softly, or even sharing memories of their own childhood. Sometimes they would let her play small games with her food, making the experience fun rather than stressful. In this environment, the girl began to feel safe. She realized that eating again did not have to be a burden, but could be part of a connection with someone she trusted. Each day brought small milestones. One morning, she surprised herself and the caretaker by finishing an entire plate of fruit. The sense of accomplishment, the simple act of nourishing herself, was a turning point. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of pride and control. She had not realized how much she had needed that feeling of being capable, being able to care for herself, and of being recognized for her efforts. Her laughter, once missing for so long, began to return in soft, shy giggles. The sound was like music to the ears of those around her. Her father, who had been closely observing these changes, was deeply moved. He watched quietly, sometimes from the doorway, sometimes from a nearby chair, as his daughter rediscovered the simple joy of eating and being present. He realized that all the gifts, toys, and luxurious surroundings in the world could never have achieved this progress. It was the gentle care, the presence of someone who truly understood her feelings, that made the difference. For him, it was a powerful lesson in parenting, empathy, and the importance of emotional connection. The girl's days gradually regained structure, but it was no longer about routines imposed by the staff or the mansion's strict schedule. Instead, the structure came from nurturing interactions and meaningful moments. She would sit at the table not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She would engage in conversation, laugh at small jokes, and even offer her own stories. Each act of participation, no matter how small, was a sign of healing. Her body, too, responded. She regained energy, her movements became livelier, and her pale complexion began to return to a healthy glow. It was not just her physical recovery that mattered. Emotionally, she started to open up more each day. She shared her fears, her sadness, and her thoughts about the past weeks. She talked about the loneliness she had felt in the grand mansion, about the absence of her mother, and about the fear that no one truly saw her for who she was. These conversations were not easy. They were sometimes filled with tears, moments of hesitation, and pauses that felt heavy with emotion. But the caretaker, the one who had been patient from the beginning, never rushed her. They listened, comforted her, and reassured her that it was okay to feel and express these emotions. This emotional connection became the foundation of her healing. The father also began to play a more active role in this part of her recovery. He started spending time with her, not as a figure of authority, but as a presence she could trust. They would walk in the garden together, play small games, and talk about her interests and dreams. The father learned to listen without judgment, to acknowledge her feelings, and to offer support rather than solutions. He realized that his presence mattered more than anything he could buy. His daughter's smile, her willingness to engage, and her slowly returning appetite were all evidence that he had taken the right steps. One particularly special moment came during a quiet afternoon in the garden. The girl, who had been sitting silently, finally took a larger bite of her favorite dessert and smiled genuinely. It was a simple act, yet it represented weeks of progress. She realized that food could be enjoyable again, not as a chore, but as a shared experience with someone she trusted. She laughed softly, and for the first time in weeks, felt a sense of normalcy. The caretaker's warm smile and encouraging words reinforced that she was safe, loved, and capable of healing. As her recovery continued, the girl began to rediscover joy in other aspects of life as well. She picked up hobbies that she had abandoned, like painting and reading, and even spent time caring for her small pets in the mansion. Each activity, though small, was a sign that she was reconnecting with the world around her. She was beginning to feel emotions again: happiness, curiosity, and excitement, emotions that had been dulled by weeks of hunger and isolation. Her world, once empty and lonely, was slowly filling with light and warmth. The gradual improvement in her health and spirit also brought a change in the household. The staff noticed her laughter returning, her appetite improving, and her willingness to engage. The mansion, which had felt quiet and heavy during her illness, became alive with small bursts of energy and happiness. They watched with quiet relief, understanding that their care had supported her. But the true catalyst of change had been the emotional connection she had established with someone who genuinely cared. By now, her father had come to fully appreciate the lesson this period had taught him. He realized that true parenting required more than providing material comfort. It required understanding, empathy, and presence. He began dedicating time each day to be with his daughter, not as a millionaire, not as a busy executive, but simply as a father. They spent mornings together reading stories, afternoons walking in the garden, and evenings talking quietly before bed. The girl, in turn, responded with trust, affection, and joy. Their bond, once strained by distance and misunderstanding, was growing stronger every day. The first big milestone of her recovery was when she ate a full meal without hesitation, smiled at her father, and even offered a bite to the caretaker. It was a moment of triumph, not just for her, but for everyone who had supported her. Weeks of patience, gentle encouragement, and emotional care had culminated in this success. Her body was gaining strength, her mind was regaining clarity, and her spirit was lifting. It was clear that her journey to full recovery was ongoing. But she had taken the most important steps. Through all this, the girl learned an important lesson herself. She realized that it was okay to rely on others, to accept help, and to express her feelings openly. She understood that asking for support was not a weakness, but a strength. And for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of hope, a feeling that the dark period of hunger, loneliness, and despair was behind her. She began to dream again, dreams filled with color, laughter, and connection, dreams that had been impossible during her time of struggle. This period of recovery, though gradual, became a turning point in her life. It showed her the power of empathy, patience, and human connection. It reminded her father that love, presence, and understanding are far more valuable than wealth and luxury. And it demonstrated that even in the darkest moments, small steps, gentle care, and emotional support can lead to profound change. The girl's life was no longer defined by hunger and despair, but by healing hope and the beginnings of happiness. This version keeps it simple, emotional, and compelling, showing the gradual recovery, small victories, and emotional growth of both the girl and her father. By now, the young girl had made incredible progress. The weeks of struggle, hunger, and loneliness were behind her, and she was finally beginning to experience life in a way she hadn't for a long time. Her body had regained strength, her appetite had returned, and her laughter was no longer a rare sound echoing through the mansion, but a daily presence that filled the halls with warmth. The transformation, however, was not just physical, it was emotional, mental, and deeply profound. She had begun to understand herself better, and more importantly, she had discovered the power of love, empathy, and genuine connection. The bond she had formed with the caretaker, the patient, kind person who had taken the time to listen, understand, and support her had become a cornerstone of her recovery. This bond went beyond simple care. It was a relationship built on trust and respect. The caretaker never pressured her, never judged her for her fears or struggles. Instead, they allowed her to open up at her own pace, offering a safe space where she could express her feelings freely. Over time, the girl realized that this kind of care and attention could truly heal the heart in ways that money and luxury never could. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Her father, who had once been preoccupied with work and wealth, had also undergone a transformation. Watching his daughter's slow but steady recovery had been a wake-up call. He had learned that no amount of money could replace the presence of a loving parent or the value of emotional support. He began spending more time with her, sharing meals, playing games, and simply being there to listen. These moments were no longer rushed or interrupted by business calls. They were meaningful and intentional. The father, once distant and absorbed in his empire, had learned to prioritize what truly mattered: his daughter's well-being, happiness, and sense of security. The mansion, which had once felt like a silent, cold place during the girl's illness, had now become lively and filled with warmth. The staff, seeing her transformation, were relieved and inspired. Her laughter became infectious, spreading through the household and reminding everyone that true happiness cannot be bought but must be nurtured. They observed how her renewed energy and confidence brought new life to the mansion. Activities that had once seemed mundane now became moments of joy, the way she painted, played music, or even walked through the gardens, her eyes bright and her steps lively. One of the most remarkable aspects of her transformation was the change in how she viewed herself. For weeks, she had felt invisible, trapped in a world of wealth that could not reach her heart. But as she recovered, she began to realize her own strength and resilience. She learned that even after facing extreme difficulties, it was possible to heal, to grow, and to embrace life again. She discovered that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a gateway to connection, trust, and understanding. This self-awareness gave her confidence that extended beyond her meals and daily routines. It touched every aspect of her life. The girl's renewed health and spirit allowed her to reconnect with activities she had abandoned during her illness. She returned to painting, spending hours with a brush in hand, creating vibrant images that reflected her emotions. She began reading more eagerly, immersing herself in stories and adventures that fueled her imagination. She even took interest in music again, her fingers dancing across piano keys with a joy that had been absent for weeks. Each activity, simple yet meaningful, became a symbol of her recovery and a reminder that life could be joyful once more. Her relationship with her father also deepened. They shared quiet conversations, laughed over little jokes, and explored their world together. The father discovered the importance of listening, of being present without judgment, and of valuing his daughter's feelings over appearances or status. He realized that the most important lessons he could teach her were not about wealth, etiquette, or success, but about empathy, love, and human connection. The daughter, in turn, learned to trust her father fully, understanding that he was there for her not just as a provider, but as someone who truly cared. There were moments of reflection for both the girl and her father. She thought about how far she had come, remembering the days when food had felt impossible, when loneliness had weighed heavily on her heart, and when she had felt invisible, even in a house full of people. She understood that her journey had not been easy, but it had taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of seeking help when needed. Her father, reflecting on his own journey, realized that being a parent required more than gifts, luxury, or discipline. It required time, empathy, and the willingness to truly see the child behind the title or wealth. As the girl regained her strength, she also became more aware of the people around her who had supported her quietly. The staff, the caretaker, and even the family doctor had all played roles in her journey. But it was the consistent, compassionate presence of someone who truly understood her that made the most difference. She learned to appreciate not just material comforts, but the warmth of human connection, the reassurance of patience, and the power of unconditional care. This understanding became a guiding principle in her life, shaping the way she would relate to others in the future. The final stage of her recovery was marked by a sense of normalcy that she had not felt in weeks. She began to eat full meals with confidence, engage in conversations naturally, and participate in activities without fear or hesitation. She smiled freely, laughed easily, and even started making plans for the future. Simple things like going for walks in the garden, reading a favorite book, or painting a new picture. These seemingly small acts were monumental for her, representing the full circle of healing from a state of weakness, despair and isolation to one of strength, joy, and emotional balance. Her father, watching this transformation, felt a profound sense of gratitude and humility. He had learned a life-changing lesson. Wealth alone could never provide what the heart truly needed. No mansion, no gifts, no luxuries could replace presence, attention, and genuine love. The experience had reshaped his priorities, teaching him that the most valuable things in life are not possessions, but relationships and emotional bonds. He committed himself to being fully present in his daughter's life from that point onward, understanding that true parenting is an ongoing journey of care, empathy, and support. The story concluded with a celebration of healing and transformation. The girl's life, once defined by struggle, hunger, and loneliness, was now full of hope, happiness, and connection. She had discovered the joy of being cared for, the power of trust, and the strength that comes from overcoming hardship. Her father, transformed by the experience, had become a more attentive, empathetic, and loving parent. Together, they had not only healed her body, but also restored the bonds of trust, love, and understanding between them. In the end, the mansion, which had once been a silent witness to her struggle, became a place of life, laughter, and love. Her recovery was not just about eating again, it was about reclaiming joy, rebuilding relationships, and learning the most important lesson of all, that true wealth lies not in money or possessions, but in love, care, and meaningful human connections. The girl's journey from hunger and despair to health and happiness became a testament to resilience, hope, and the transformative power of compassion.